to be talking about this beautiful book. Oh, stunning. And I think we're ready to begin. So hello, everyone. Welcome to PMP Live. My name is Leah, and I'm a bookseller, politics, and prose, and I have the honor of being your host this evening. Just so you know, for this event, we will have closed captions enabled. If you would like to view the captions, click on the live transcript button and select show subtitle if you'd like to use those. And thank you so much for joining us and tuning in this virtual format, which allows us to continue to bring these amazing authors and their beautiful and poignant words to readers like you. And there's no exception for our guests this evening. I'm so excited to welcome our very special guest, Amber McBride, along with Ashley Woodfolk. Thank you so much. As we celebrate Amber's new novel in verse and recent National Book Award Finalist, congratulations, Moth. Look at this beautiful book. Ugh, stunning. Of course, you can click on the link that will drop in the chat box so you can purchase your own copies of Amber's beautiful book, Moth, if you haven't already, or grab another copy for a friend, as well as use that link to check out other books by the authors. Also, if you have a question for our guest this evening, you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. At the end of our chat, our guests will have some time to answer some of your questions. And you can also vote on those questions you really want answered by clicking the thumbs up button. And as always, please remember that this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that friends be respectful of one another in their questions and comments. And again, thank you, friends, for joining us this evening and supporting indie bookstores and these amazing authors. So now on to the event you're all waiting for. It is truly my honor to introduce author, professor, and poet, Amber McBride. Amber received a BA in English from James Madison University and an MFA in poetry from Emerson College. She has taught various courses from English composition and English literature to poetry composition at James Madison University, Strayer University, and Northern Virginia Community College. Currently, Amber is a professor of English at University of Virginia. And in addition to her teaching, Amber's poetry has been published in several literary magazines, including Plowshares and Rumpus. So it is no surprise we are celebrating Amber's hauntingly beautiful debut YA novel in verse, Moth. And tonight, Amber is joined by fellow author Ashley Woodfolk, an author of books that will make you cry, because they sure have made me cry. Ashley has written several books, including The Beauty That Remains, When You Were Everything, the Fly Girl series, and the much anticipated upcoming novel in verse, Nothing Burns as Bright as You. Ashley has also contributed to a few short story collections, including the recent collection Blackout, which is amazing. Along with her brilliant literary contributions, Ashley also worked in children's book publishing for over a decade, so she knows her stuff in this world. So it is truly my honor to pass the conversation over to Amber and Ashley. The virtual stage is yours.
Yay!
Yay!
I'm so excited to be here. I'm so honored to be the person who gets to do this launch with you. It's super exciting. And I mean, I'm always excited when I see another talented, gorgeous Black woman joining the YA space, but I was exceptionally excited after I read your novel, and it blew my mind. It was so beautiful. And I know I'm not the only one who thought that, because National Book Award, hello.
Right.
Crazy. Okay, wait, before we get started, this was not on my list of questions, but can we just talk about you finding out about that?
About the short list?
Yes.
I was hiding.
We can talk about the long list and the short list if you want.
The long list was funny because I was teaching. You never know that that's going to happen. So I was teaching and I had my phone off, and then I turned my phone on and I had like 30 missed messages from people. And I was like, what just happened? And then for the short list, I knew that that was coming. So I was hiding in the woods doing hoodoo things. And then someone, like my mom, yelled to me, and I was afraid to look. So I was waiting for other people to tell me. So yeah, it was surreal. It's still surreal. I'm still like in shock. And I'm just completely honored. The books are amazing. I got all the ones that were out and I read them and I was like, wow, these books are all brilliant. So whew.
Yay, and so is yours.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I might go on mute when I'm not talking just because like my child is out there. and he might randomly scream something.
I watch all your stories because your child is so adorable, and I'm always like, "Where's the baby?"
Yeah, he's out there, and you might hear him. Okay, so whenever I'm talking to a debut author, I always want to, and obviously you've been published before, but this is your first novel, and so I always want to know about their publishing journey. Is this the first novel you've written? How did you find your agent? Just like give us sort of your journey, like how did it all come together?
It was a long journey. It's a very long journey. Let's see. When did this even start? I wrote my first book, or a novel, not poetry, when I was like, I'm gonna write a novel. And I think it was like 2015. Queried that, nobody wanted it. And then this is just to get an agent. And then I wrote another one, queried that, it got closer, but nobody wanted it. And then my third book was a sci-fi fantasy, and that's actually what my agent signed me on, which is always surprising to people. And then so you have your agent and everyone's like, oh yes, you have an agent, now you'll be a published author. No, it's not how it works. And so the book that my agent signed me on didn't sell. People weren't really wanting sci-fi at that time. It was like 2018. And then I wrote another book. And this is when things get a little bit like I might leave publishing. I had some people know the sticky situation, but it was a situation with a middle grade book I wrote that kind of like devastated me. And I almost was like, I'm done with this. And then that was around 2019. My grandfather also passed away. And that was when my agent, Rena Rossner, was like, why don't you just write poetry? Why don't you try a novel in verse? And I was like, all right, cool. So I disappeared for like 2 months. And then I came back and had this novel, and Fywell and Friends liked it, and my editor, Liz Sabla, loved it, and we've been working with it, and it's been the best experience ever. I couldn't ask for a better editor or publishing house. I love it. So yeah.
And I used to work there, so I love all those people. I love Liz.
Yeah.
I love
amazing. I'm so lucky. I feel so lucky to be so supported all the time. It's been wonderful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But yeah, sometimes it's a long road.
It's bumpy.
It's bumpy. But look where you are. You made it.
I think that's why everything is so surreal to me, because I feel like people assume that it's an easy-ish road after you get an agent. And I feel like I had one of the most bumpy ones. One day we'll talk about it privately about what happened. Okay. But like, it was one of those things where I was like, maybe I'm not that great of a writer. Maybe I can't do this. And I have the most supportive parents, and they were like, that's not it. And so it turned out great. So I think that now with my debut being so well, people liking it and understanding what I was trying to do with it, it's just so surreal and affirming, that no, I kept going, and that was the best choice.
Yeah, no, I always, whenever I'm like talking to someone who is sort of just coming into the industry, or someone who wants to get into the industry or whatever, I always tell people that like, you have to be relentless, because that's the only way that you survive this. And that like, you can get a million no's, but you only ever need one yes.
One. Exactly.
I always tell people that. And I tell people that like, even once you have a book published, that doesn't mean that someone else can't tell you no later. Like,
it's not like you can't get no's.
I had a similar, not exactly the same, but like after my first book came out, well, actually, after my second book came out, I had an option, and my option got rejected. And so, yeah, so that's totally a thing. Like, you can, people can still say, but then I wrote my novel that's coming out next year. And like, that wasn't under contract or anything. I just wrote that. It was like a pandemic book. It just like poured out of me kind of thing.
Those pandemic books, people have been writing.
Books, yeah, they hit different.
They really do.
They really do.
And I love your book. I got to read it, and I cried a lot.
I mean, I just also cried reading yours. So
it's coming back to me.
Yeah.
But I was like,
karma.
I think the thing about your novel, when is it coming out? When is it coming out?
It's coming out in April
April.
5th. Yeah.
It's so soon.
So there's some time.
Is that I love the style of verse. Like I'm a big fan of like long line, that kind of writing, and yours does that. And I was like, so when I opened it, I was like, ooh, yeah, I like this. So absolutely beautiful. And the concept, and then just the way the story is woven. People
Okay, we're not supposed to be talking about my book. We're here to talk about your book.
I just finished it. So okay. But yes, everyone should get that. Pre-order that
but
one.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. But yes, we should talk about the structure of your book. I feel like I had a question about that. How did you decide, I guess, the way in which the story would unfold? Because it is a road trip novel. And I don't think that's super spoilery to talk about.
No.
But yeah, how did you come up with that? And how did you decide like where the stops would be and sort of what the character's journey would be?
Right. So the general structure of it was that I wanted two marginalized people to meet. And then I knew that Sani was going to be Navajo. And I wanted the healing to happen on Navajo land, AKA not the United States kind of feeling, like not in a safe place. And so I was like, the only way we're going to get from here to here is a road trip. Yeah. And also I picked the road trip stops based on places I had been. So my family had road trip to the Navajo Nation before because I have family members who are Navajo. So I went that general way, and then I checked to see if there were any cool stops we might have missed. So I think there's like an abandoned amusement park that's in the book that we didn't actually go to, but I mean, you got to put an abandoned
cool
park
yes
into a book, so
absolutely.
That stayed. But yeah, I just kind of pulled out a map and was talking to my parents. I was like, where did we go? And because I have no sense of direction, and they were like, we went this way. And so yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And then the like overarching metaphor of Moth being, her name is Moth, but also Moth being this kind of idea that goes throughout, is that the road trip is literally like the caterpillar, like growing towards being in an egg again, and then, re-blossoming into a moth. So it really worked. It's one of those books where it happened so serendipitously that like I came up with the name. I was like, her name is Moth. Don't know where, it just came to me. And everyone was like, that's not a name. I was like, it is today. I just decided. And then the book organically just really, it was the easiest book I ever wrote, which is so crazy. Not in the sense that it was difficult to edit, but like the idea and the characters were so clear to me so quickly, which was different than my other books before.
Oh no, I had a similar experience too. And like, I feel like when that happens, it makes you it gives you sort of faith in yourself again. You're like, oh wait, maybe I can do this.
Wait, maybe I do know how to write a book. Like
a book. Wow. At least one.
Yeah, at least one book. It came so quickly. And I joke about that because my second book, which is coming out in August 2022, it's called We're All So Good at Smiling, was not the case. That was not the case at all. It was I think I edited it like 5 times before my editor even saw it. And it was very hard. But also has a character named Whimsy. And now my grandma is like, why can't you name your characters normal names? And I was like, I don't know, not possible. Moth and Whimsy. That's just how it is.
They're your children. You can name them whatever you want.
That's what I'm trying to say. I wanted them to have unique names. My grandma was like, you're naming them like celebrities name their kids. And I was like, I mean, kind of, maybe.
I think it works. You mentioned Sani, and I am obsessed with him. I just feel like he is so gorgeously complex. He just has so much going on. I've never read a character like him, and I just felt like he was so wonderfully drawn. Can you talk a little bit about who he is and how you developed and researched him, and also why you chose him as a foil for Moth?
Well, so the character Moth was obviously the first character I thought of. And then I knew that Sani was going to be Navajo, and I
Pause. I feel like maybe we should give like we probably should have done this at the beginning, but I feel like we should give like a brief, like this book is about.
Oh, right. That might be helpful. We're so organized. We've done this before.
I know. We're professionals here. So yeah, just like start with like saying like a couple sentences about what it's about, and then we can like dive into Sani.
Excellent. So the book is a book about a girl named Moth who her family dies in a car crash, and she lives with her Aunt Jack in the suburbs where nobody looks like her, and she feels so alone. She's one of the only Black kids at her school, and she just feels invisible, like nobody sees her. And then this kid named Sani, it has moved from the Navajo Nation, and he sees her, and they start to understand each other and share stories. And he has a very difficult background with the abusive stepfather, and they decide to go on this road trip back to the Navajo Nation together to kind of heal. And yeah, that's the gist of it. And there's a lot of healing and storytelling and a lot of heart in it. But the character of Sani, I hopped on the phone with my aunt, who's Navajo, and was like, I kind of want to write this character. I had this idea for this character. Is there anything very specific, which I think is very important, that I should not be talking about? Like I shouldn't be getting into, because I'm not Navajo myself. And she said, she was like, I wish you would just write a modern Navajo boy, not like this caricature of something, like a very complex person. And I was like, I can do that, because I think people are complex, and we always are, as marginalized people, put into these stereotypes of what we're supposed to be or how we act. And I wanted Sani to be a character who had very much respected and loved his heritage, but also was modern and understood what was happening in the world. Like he lived outside of the reservation and he understood that world as well. But I guess he was very organic in the way that Moth was created, where I just wanted to write the softest boy ever. And this person who also had these broken pieces that he was trying to get back together the same way Moth was, and for them to see each other and help each other get through this difficult time. And so I just saw that with softness, this kind of compassion that's more than skin deep of what someone's dealing with on both sides for both of them. And I think that's why they kind of have a connection in the book. But yeah, that makes me really happy that you like the character of Sani, because I love Sani.
Oh, yeah.
I
love a cinnamon roll.
Right?
especially if it's a boy of color, because I feel like so often boys of color aren't sort of given the space to be soft or gentle or kind or
honest, and not playing games, and just like so authentic and not afraid of saying, this is how I feel right now, these are my feelings. But yeah, me too. I love a cinnamon roll. They're always the best. Sweetheart.
You mentioned Hudu a moment ago, and for anyone who doesn't know what it is, can you give us like sort of a brief sort of overview of how you would describe it? And then also I want you to talk a little bit about why it was important to include that practice in Moth's story.
Right. So Hudu is an African-American magic or root system that was established when enslaved Africans were brought over, stolen from their homelands, and weren't allowed to practice their own beliefs anymore. Christianity was kind of pushed on them. And so by creating this, I guess, system of Hudu, there was this idea of West African belief systems melded in with Christianity, almost hidden, so that those beliefs could still be practiced. And it was widely practiced everywhere. And then with the Great Migration, literally went around the whole United States. The difference people ask me a lot is, what's the difference between Hudu and Voodoo? And Hudu is a practice, Voodoo is a religion. And Hudu is specifically African-American created. And it specifically talks about honoring your ancestors, a lot of knowledge of root systems in herbal remedies, because you weren't able to afford medicine. So it's this helping yourself kind of thing. And then always balance. So this idea of balance being key. And if things are off balance, whatever you do to make it balanced again is not necessarily bad, which I love that kind of grit in that. Like, I'm not apologizing. If you happen to be a person who owns people and I put decide that I'm going to do bad things, that it's balanced because you're hurting other people. And I really liked that, that fierceness about Hudu. And I thought it was important to put in the book because I practice Hudu and a lot of my family members do. They're from South Carolina. And I think it's a little known practice that a lot of Black kids don't know about, that they have this amazing system that like was hidden for so long and was a very closed system because people were persecuted for practicing it. People were jailed for practicing it in the 1960s and 50s and everything like that. And so I just wanted to highlight a system that is still very prevalent and means a lot to me. And I mean, when I found out I was shortlisted, the first thing I did was do an offering for my ancestors because I was like, y'all put in work. Nice. So I really think it's a really important thing for Black kids specifically to know about. It's something that they can dig into and understand that they have a power deep in them that's been there forever. But yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, no, I mean, beautiful. And I mean, I was personally really touched by it because I don't think anyone in my family practices it now, but I remember like, it was like, as I was reading it, I remembered stuff from my childhood and I was like,
Right.
wait, was that?
That's what it
Maybe
was.
that was that.
Actually, so many people I've talked to were like, wait, this little thing happened. Was that? And I was like, it is. And
Yeah.
like, my dad was talking about one time, someone's hat that they didn't know was in a car. And immediately his aunt like got salt and things. And like, that's Hoodoo. There's jumping the broom is Hoodoo. There's so many things that are part of that tradition that people don't realize. And it's getting lost. And I just think it's really important to let people know about it if they want to research it and learn more about it. It's great. And I just love that it just talks about how your ancestors did these extraordinary things and they were so resilient, and that's within you and you can still call on them. And I'm very interested in the idea of that love and strength just constantly being there and being one of the reasons that, I mean, personally, I feel like I can do so much. So I just wanted other people to have access to that if they didn't know about it.
No, I think that is lovely. And it's super, I don't know, it's super touching. It's like making me emotional a little bit. My husband is Chinese American, and they have a similar relationship with, or I should say some Chinese people have a similar relationship with their ancestors and sort of honoring them in that way. And so I just really love that also exists within the African American community. And there's something there that can be, drawn upon and sort of, owned in a way that like,
it's
I
yours.
had never thought about before. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something that it belongs to you. And it's something with so much knowledge, the amount of knowledge when it comes to, and also I think that there's something about it that, so I go to more holistic medicine in just general life when I'm like sick, not get vaccinated, not that kind of stuff. Like I want to be clear in these times. But like if I have a cold, like I'll look into other kinds of like medicine. And I learned that like Hoodoo, Navajo culture, even when you talk about what our Eastern medicine, all do this thing where they understand herbs and like the land so much. And it's absolutely beautiful how much they take from it and how it works almost equally to this modern medicine. Like peppermint works as anti-nausea medicine better and sometimes better than actual anti-nausea medicine. And people don't know that.
So does ginger.
Ginger as well, exactly. So it's crazy to me and how much you have access to. But that's a whole nother beautiful kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I researched a ton of that stuff when I was pregnant, just because I was like afraid to take anything.
Right. So you're like, I'm doing the natural way every time.
Yeah, for sure. So you also mentioned a little while ago just the elements of storytelling that you utilize in this novel, and I feel like it's a huge element that goes throughout the book, and it's kind of on both sides, both characters. And in their whole journey together, there's a lot of storytelling. In both of their cultures, there's a lot of storytelling. So can you talk a little bit about why that tradition was so important for you and for your characters and for the story?
I think that there's like a historical reason, and then also just it worked in the story. But the historical reason is much more of the oral tradition predates the written tradition by thousands of years. And I think that specifically for marginalized people, sometimes access to language or writing wasn't as important because these storytellers were telling these intricate stories and they could tell stories. And so this idea of storytelling as a way to document history is something that I've always been extremely interested in. And then also, if you know your own story, you know who you are. You know what I mean? Like, knowing your story is so powerful. It's why history isn't even taught correctly in schools. If people knew their history, they would have more autonomy. They would understand their power a lot more. So I think that knowing your truth is such a theme within this book, but also something that should be done for everyone. And so I thought that the telling of stories or people's origin stories or their personal stories was something that I thought was really important, because your story is what brings you back to yourself. Like whenever you're, I don't know about you, but like whenever I have like a reading, like when I read poetry and I would get super nervous, I'd be like, you're Amber McBride. You are descended from this. Like you would tell yourself that, and it makes you brave. I don't know why, but it does. Yeah. And so I think that storytelling and stories are powerful. And I think sharing them is giving a piece of yourself. And so when Sani and Moth share these stories, they're literally saying, here's a piece of my heart. Here's a piece of who I am that I'm sharing with you. And I think that's a very intimate kind of thing.
Says the person who's writing all this poetry and all these books, giving us all these pieces of your heart.
I know. It's so much. It's so much.
Wait till you read my next book. So scary. That's why it's so scary and overwhelming.
So terrifying.
Yeah.
It's so scary to do.
If you're doing it right, it should be, I think.
Right. It is. It is. It's frightening. And people don't talk about that, do they? They're like, oh, wait, your book will come out and then you'll realize that half your heart is in it. Mm-hmm. And you have to deal with that afterwards. But yeah.
And I mean, I feel like anybody who doesn't feel super vulnerable or like really, I don't know, exposed when their novel comes out, like, I don't know, I feel like they're doing something wrong. Like if you're like, putting your heart into it, it is scary. It's really, really scary.
It's scary because it feels like a critique of you, like no matter what, that's what it feels like. It's like, for you don't like me, that's fine. And like, that's not to say like there always are constructive kinds of, criticism, but I think that it's like you put something of yourself into the book. And for my second book, We're Also Good at Smiling, which is talking about clinical depression, which is something I deal with. Like, I think the reason it took me so long to write it well was because I was scared to put too much of myself into it. And then when I finally my therapist was like, Amber, just write the book. And I was like, okay, be brave. And that's when it started working. But you're right. Like if you don't put a certain amount of heart, it just doesn't work. It doesn't feel like you're doing it authentically, specifically in poetry, because you can't hide in poetry. Like there's no extrovert. You just got to put your heart in there and hope for the best.
Is your next novel also in verse?
It is. We did that too. Yes. Yes. Me looking at verse stuff now, I'm like, I just want to read everyone's verse. I don't know if I want to write another novel in verse.
It's rough. It's rough. I don't know. I am trying to decide if I have an idea and I'm trying to decide if I'm going to do it in verse or not, because I'm stressed.
It's different. Nobody tells you. People are like, oh, it's shorter, so it's easier. No, that's not the case. It's a little different than that, but yeah.
Okay, so we have some questions from the audience. I still have a couple more questions, but let's go to the audience questions first. And if we have time, we can bounce back to my stuff. So Leslie asks, what was your writing life like when you were a teenager?
Ooh, what was my writing life like when I was a teenager? I feel like it's a telltale thing when you haven't been asked that question before, where you like repeat it back to yourself to give yourself time. You're like, what was my life like? As a teenager, I wrote my first poem when I was in the 6th or 7th grade. And I guess that from that moment on, I never stopped writing. It was almost manic. It was a way that I was dealing with my own depression at the time. And my parents were so supportive. They had like little books they would put together of my bad
Aw.
poems with misspelled words and everything. But yeah, I always wrote. I'm a very regimented kind of writer. I write every day, and I want to be clear. I think there's like this thing about you write every day, and I don't write well every day. I just write something every day, whether that's a poem or a few lines. And I don't feel like I make sense unless I write every day. And so I started writing almost every day when I was about in like 7th or 8th grade, poetry mainly. But yeah, I was just a very organized kind of, it's my writing time. It was almost like meditation time, or like when people played video games. I never was into that. I was into like creating these little worlds on paper. So it was I was always writing. Haven't stopped.
That's amazing. I have never done that. That's always been the goal. And like, nope, I've accepted that.
And that's like totally normal. But I think my therapist thinks it like, well, one, shout out to my therapist if she happens to be here, but I think it's almost a medicine for me. So like, it's my job now. Yeah, I write, but when I'm writing every day, like I'm saying, it's not every day. It's not, oh, I'm working towards this next book. It's just that at some point every day, like I feel like it's almost like a dose of medicine to get whatever I'm feeling out on paper. But yeah.
Yeah, I would probably be a healthier person if I wrote every day.
I'll tell you stuff you didn't know. You just be like,
Yeah.
wow, that's what I think about that.
Where did that come from?
It's almost like journaling. Some people journal every day.
Yeah, for sure.
And they are very organized, and they can like go back into their journals and be like, that's what I was thinking 6 years ago. And it's kind of nice to have that kind of documentation.
I journaled every day when I was in high school, but like never again since then.
So many feelings in high school. You gotta
so many feelings. The way that I have like a series of composition notebooks, like, yeah, I still have them, which is hilarious.
It's important. You go read them now, you're like, wow, I had a lot of emotions.
I did. I mean, I still have a lot of emotions, so it's okay. Let's see. Daisy asks, can you both talk about the difference between and any similarities in writing a novel in verse versus a prose novel?
You should go first on that one.
I should go first.
You're very close to, you wrote a lot of prose before.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it backwards. So you go first.
Well, no, you also wrote prose before.
I did, but it wasn't like in the world, I guess. So I'm passing this one to you.
Okay. I feel like I need to write another novel in verse before I can fully answer this question, just because, like I said, the pandemic books hit different. I mean, you've mentioned therapy a few times, and I feel like I was like very much having the last few years, I've had like an identity crisis. And like, without getting like too deep, like I realized I was queer because of several different things that happened in my life at the same time. And then sort of reckoning with that and coming out, even though I am married to a man and, you know, have a child, like there was just like a lot going on in my head and in my heart. And there was a lot of relationships from my past that I was taking a second gander at. And I was like, oh, you did that because you're gay.
Yes.
And so just like sort of like thinking through a lot of that and thinking about of like sort of a lot of like latent queer feelings and I don't know, a lot of sort of denial that I have been in for a long time, not necessarily conscious denial. It just sort of burst forth in a way. And so I feel like writing Nothing Burns as Bright as You was a very unique experience that I probably won't have again. And that is my only novel in verse right now. And so writing that was extremely cathartic because I was able to sort of process a lot of things that I hadn't processed. A lot of like relationships that were blurry and friendships that were weird and like, you know, sort of all that kind of stuff. So I almost feel like it was like a therapy book. And so writing it was a very different experience from any prose novel that I've ever written, just because of all of that stuff that was happening. And we were in the middle of a pandemic, you know.
That was there too. Yeah.
Yeah, but I will say one difference for me was that I felt like I knew what was going to happen at the end of this book, like pretty quickly.
Right.
Whereas with my prose novels, I'm not a big outliner. I'm more of a outline a little bit and then right to that point, and then outline a little bit more and then right to that point. Yeah. I think it's called like the headlight method. Like you can only write
just
as far
as further. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that had been my experience before. But when I started writing Nothing Burns as Bright as You, I knew immediately, oh, this is how this book is going to end. So that was the main thing for me, but I don't know if that's particularly related to verse or not. It might have just
I do. Okay, so I'm a pantser, so I just write. I just go for it. I'm like, I'm gonna go where my characters want me to go. Yeah. Outlined this entire book.
Wow.
Because there's just no way, is there? When you write in verse, because you have so little space to tell an entire story, you can't be as liberal with the kinds of words and the things you talk about. And so I needed to know, I need a bus stop poem. I need this kind of poem. I need this kind of poem. And I needed to know where it was going because I had to, work towards that. So this was my first book I feel like there's something to that. It's my first book that I also ever outlined. And I outlined my second novel in verse as well. But then I'm working on a fantasy book right now. Who knows where it's going to go? I don't know.
Right.
So I think that there's something to that. And then also, I personally find that when you're writing in verse, there's a immediacy that you feel like you have to be on top of at all times. There isn't room for just, I don't know, that really beautiful passage, or like it's just all the trimmings have to be cut away. And it's a lot. You have to just like be like, this isn't gonna work. But actually, I was gonna say, pandemic has been crazy because I always knew that I was queer, pansexual specifically, but I ended up coming out to my family over the pandemic.
Oh,
There's
wow.
something, a lot was happening during the pandemic. I was like,
Yeah.
I feel like I just need everyone to know, like everyone knows I'm not a person who has like, I don't really love being in relationships, but it just felt like, so it never was something that came up. But then I was like, this is an important part of my identity. I don't know why I'm not. The pandemic. We were all just sitting and thinking about our lives
Constantly.
So much.
Yeah.
And like really inspecting who we were. It's crazy. I've just heard so many people talk about like the things they discovered about themselves because we were so secluded from everyone, and still are to a point. And it's just crazy how that happens. But yeah,
totally. Yeah, I had realized it a few years before the pandemic, but I had sort of kind of been just like coasting,
you could kind of avoid it. And then you were like,
I don't need to think about this.
Yeah.
I don't need to talk about this. Forever. Yeah. But yeah, that pandemic was like, wait, no, you got to deal with this, honey.
Yeah.
Like,
today is the day.
Today is the day. Okay. Someone said, Alexia says, is there a genre or age category that you both have wanted to write in that you haven't yet?
I want to write in every category and every age at some point. I might have an adult poetry collection that might be doing things soon. But yeah, I think that I don't ever want to be a writer. It's like when my books get announced, I want people to be like, "Ooh, I wonder if it's going to be adult, fantasy, young adult, whatever." Like, I just want to keep going where my curiosity goes. I hope that I get to have a career like that. So really, I want to write for everyone at some point. But yeah, what about you?
I'm the same.
All the things.
Yeah, all the things. I mean, I've only written YA so far, but I have things that I'm working on that are not YA. Yeah, so yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the next couple of years will be interesting to see what.
Look out for what we have coming up. We don't know. It could be something.
It could be anything.
During the pandemic, I got to teach at home a lot for my classes. So I had so much time commuting, takes so much time. And I got like 30,000, almost like 40,000 words into writing a Gothic novel, an adult Gothic novel. That's just like sitting on my computer. I don't have time to work with it yet. But like, it's crazy when you have time, like the things you start playing with. So yeah, anything's possible.
Yeah. It hasn't been announced yet, but whatever, it'll be announced soon enough. But I have a picture book coming, and I'm working on an adult novel too. And I mean, like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
but yeah, it's fun.
It's fun to just try new things. And you learn something about writing when you write in every different kind of genre. Like, I learned so much about, when I wrote in verse, I learned so much. And when I went back to prose, I learned that I'm such a better writer just from writing in verse. Like, it's crazy. The things that transfer over. So it's always nice to be learning new skills and practicing and challenging yourself.
Yeah. Let's see. Sam says, music and song is deeply rooted in the story. How did you come up with the book playlist? Did you have a playlist that you listened to when you wrote this?
Yes, that's the playlist right there. I took a few songs out because it's young adult and some of those songs probably shouldn't have been in the playlist. But no, that's in the back. That's what I was listening to when I was writing. I just met with the school visit in DC today. And one of the things I was asking them, what song should I add to the playlist? And they had a lot of suggestions. So I think I need to go add those to Spotify because they were great suggestions. They were like, I forgot the one. It was so good. And they had examples. They were like, because in this part of the book, this happens. So this needs to be there. And I was like, y'all are the cutest people I've ever met. I love all of you so much.
The kids are all right.
They're so great. They're so great. But yeah, it was what I listened to. And I was a dancer for over 18 years, a ballet and contemporary dancer. So I'm the kind of person where literally at all times music is playing. And so I can't like function without music. Silence, I don't understand it.
Yeah. I'm the same way.
Yeah, like when people don't listen to music, I don't understand how your brain doesn't just collapse on itself. I don't know. For me, I always have music going. So those were the songs I was listening to when I was writing Moth. And I also find that when I make a playlist for everything, but music was so important here because Sani is a musician. But for me, when I listen to that playlist, like let's say I know I'm going to write in an hour and I start the playlist, I get back into the book before I even sit down. I'm like, okay, I'm in their heads. And it takes me so much a shorter time to like get back into the zone of that book because I know that playlist is the vibe of the book.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Do you make a playlist for like every new story that you write?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's also a playlist at the back of my second book because now it's a thing apparently. Let's make this a thing. Let's all put our playlists because we all need new music in our lives.
Leah Johnson had the cutest thing in her Rise to the Sun mailing. It was like a little Spotify keychain. And if you scanned it with your phone, it took you to her playlist.
I want that.
It was amazing. I had never seen that before. And it was so cute and like functional and just like,
you just have to scan it. It's so easy.
Yeah, it was great.
That's cute.
Yeah, it's very cute.
Me taking notes. I want to do that. That's adorable.
So wait, let me look at, did I get through all of my questions? Oh, I wanted to see if you wanted to read a little bit. We have some time. So if you want to read a little bit.
If you would like.
If you would like. If you don't, we have more questions.
Let's get to everyone's question. No, okay. I love reading, but surprise. I guess I don't know if it's a secret or not. I'm doing my own audiobook and
that's awesome.
Yeah, but one thing they don't tell you about doing your own audiobook is at some point you start realizing, do I know how to read? Like you literally like why when you're reading for that long. And I have a session tomorrow and I'm literally avoiding words at this point.
Okay, so let's not do a reading.
No, I can do one. Do you want to hear one? Let's do one. I can do it.
Okay. Do a short one. Do a super short one.
Okay. Let's find. Oh, I know which one we should do. I think it's on page like 70. Oh, I like this one. This one is called Dust One, and it's from Moth's perspective. But it's really short. Dust One. I don't forgive her. I muffle a sob and dust coughs onto my brown hands. My insides are as shriveled up and as dry as dirt. I am choking on dirt. Yeah, it's a tiny one. They're like two tiny ones, like side by side. Perfect.
I love tiny ones. I have a couple of tiny ones.
It's nice when you get to a small one, you're like, well, when you're reading for your audiobook, if you end up doing that, like when you get to a short one, you're like, yes, this is nice. And then you have a long one, you're like, why did I write this long poem? It's great.
That's hilarious. Okay, I feel like the last question in the Q&A box is a good one to end on.
Okay.
Leslie says, I'm a teacher and I have students who want to write and I want to give them advice. What would you tell them?
Wow. Well, I tell them, I guess what I tell my students, because I do teach poetry, is give yourself permission to make any mistake you want and to write anything you want, and know that you can edit whenever you want. Honestly, just it's giving yourself permission to do all the things and then realize what your style is. So if someone says, write a poem, you could inspect what that even means. Like, is it going to be a poem that has stanzas? Is it going to be a poem that's like 16 places on a page? Like, be creative, let yourself and let your imagination go, and then rein it in later when you have an audience that's going to look at it. But when you're alone, do whatever you want. Just that, if you could stop the voice in your head from telling you can't, you have literally dealt with half the issues of being a writer. Like, if you just give yourself permission to write badly and whatever you want, and then you've dealt with half the issues of figuring out what to write or how to write.
That is definitely true. God, I mean, my go-to advice is the relentless thing. Like, you only need one yes. Don't let rejection sort of slow you down. You have to kind of be cocky in a way, like when you get a rejection, or if somebody says they don't like your writing or whatever, you have to sort of go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, well, I'm going to write something that's even better than that. As opposed to being like, oh no, like they didn't like it. Also, I think it's important to recognize your audience, because everything you write is not going to be for everybody. And I think that when you become intentional enough that you understand who your audience is, negative feedback from the wrong people won't affect you at all. Like I'm someone who reads a lot of my reviews. People always like judge me for that. You do too?
Yeah.
People always judge me for that.
Do you ever read them and laugh? Like, especially like the bad ones. Like ones where they're like, I don't really like poetry, but I read this. And I'm like, okay.
Yes, exactly. So that's exactly what I was getting at. Like, once you know who your audience is, if someone who is not your audience says something negative to you or tries to give you feedback, you know not to listen to them because it's not for them.
Exactly. And that's fine.
And it's totally fine. Yeah.
And I think go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, I love when I read reviews and they're like, this is why I need to stop reading YA. And I'm like, yeah, you should. Or at least don't leave a review for it since you hate YA.
Since you dislike YA and you've noticed that. No, but I think that another thing my mom always tells me is that what other people think about you is none of your business. Like, it really isn't. And I think that I'm really good at critique and reading bad reviews because of that. It's like, I worked hard on this thing and it's exactly what I want. And not everyone's going to like me. And that's fine. And so like, I think that what you said about having that kind of getting a thick skin and realizing like your art is your art. Just like there's people who don't like, I don't know, any artist who's like a really well-known artist. I don't know.
Beyonce.
Yes. Same time. There's people who don't like Beyonce. Beyonce doesn't care because that's not for her audience. Like, she knows who her audience is. Or like anybody who's like really well known. So yeah, be authentic to yourself, get a thick skin, and trust your intuition, basically, is what we're saying, I think.
Yep, that's what we're saying.
The end.
Hi, Leah.
I can listen to you guys forever. I feel bad having to pop in and start wrapping things up. Thank you guys so much for these such great insights and such truth that you're all sharing with us. Sadly, that's all we have for time for questions. Thank you guys so much for all your contributions, viewers, all those amazing questions. And of course, many thanks to Amber and Ashley for joining us this evening and sharing your stories and insights. And of course, thank you so much, viewers, for joining us today and supporting these seriously astounding authors. And again, this amazing book, it really kind of sits with you in your bones after reading. So I just want to share one thing that Amber says in the acknowledgements. You say that this is a gift in iron to soothe the creases that wrinkle up your soul. And I think that's such a beautiful way. So thank you for this gift. So of course, friends who haven't, click on that link in the chat box to grab a copy, as well as Ashley's amazing books and pre-order her new one. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to be able to talk to friends about it. And also, if you want to find out about our upcoming events, check out our website for updated listings. You can follow us on our children and teen department on social media. We'll drop that handle in the chat box. We're at Kids in Prose. You can also watch our past events posted on our Politics and Prose YouTube page, including this one, as many times as you want to take in all of this amazing advice and these beautiful words. So thank you both so much again. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope you all keep reading widely and expanding your world and stay safe and read these amazing books. Thank you.